Hi everybody, this is Katie again. In this second video, viewing files and directories, we're going to look at some new commands and test some things out. So I'll try to keep it short as well. Linux, it's important to know that everything in Linux is represented as a file. So if you have a volume, it's going to have a file name. If you have a printer, it'll have a file name. There's text files, binary data files, executable files. Directories are represented as file names, linked files, device names, and then pipes and sockets that we'll get to in Linux too, some of these things at the end. But we'll work with a lot of these different types of files in this unit and our units in this class. So mostly what we do is work with test files and binary files in our class. But they're all explained there. Important thing to know with files on a Linux system is that you can have, it supports long file names up to 255 characters, but you don't want to make a file name that long. Everything in Linux is case sensitive. So if you create a file that's called homework 2. or homework3.txt, for example, it is very different than a file called homework3.txt with a lowercase h. So everything case sensitive. A lot of times when we name files, we name something that they represent, and also we don't put spaces to them, but we would use an underscore to represent a space. So if I do something like homework_3.txt, that would be preferred method than instead of homework3.text. And that's because in our command line, it's hard to type a space. Usually a space indicates a different entry, like a different argument or a different part of the command. And underscores are used when we're using command lines instead. You want to avoid special characters, and also there are invisible files on our systems, and those begin with a period. So let me log into my system over here. And when you're at the terminal, you could type the command ls, and that's how you view files and directories. So ls, let's see, I'm going to go to the root directory. So I just cd space / and then enter, and that takes me right to root. And then if you did an ls, you'll see what you see up here, the basic directories. But if you do an ls space -a, you could see a lowercase a, you can see all, there's an error. You will be able to see all invisible files as well. Whoops, not L, I just want to do A right now. So ls is the command to list files and directories, and then if you use man pages on ls, you'll see a whole bunch of different options. One of them, -a, this will show you invisible files. So the only invisible file that we'll see in here is the period and the ... Those are to help navigate. So let's try it on our home directory. So a quick way to get home using our meta character that we learned in the last section that you just read. cd space cd space tilde. That's that character on the upper left-hand corner. Now do an ls-a. Oops, not a capital A, because a capital A is something different. And you'll see some invisible files here. So in my home directory, when I just do ls, you'll see just a list of directories and files. But an A, desktop, documents, downloads, just this stuff. But the A shows us invisible files like the /rc and the _profile, the .config directory, the .bash_history, and the .bash_logout file. Some things in Linux have to be invisible. so they have to have a period in front of them. And if you want to see invisible files, just do the -A with it. So ls, again, the command that we use to view our file names. Let's see what else is here. Here's a list of common extensions that you'll see in Linux. Text files, I always add the .text extension. When we start making shell scripts, we'll do the .exe. If you have a programming file, it'll be like .cpp or .cc. HTML files are common. We do a whole section at the end of the semester on zipping and compressing files, so you'll see .gz or .tar, config files, .cfg, pictures. Most of these, they're pretty common. Those are just common file extensions you'll see in a Linux system. PWD we've already looked at. LS we've looked at. ls-F, that's another option that you can apply to the ls command, and that will append a special character to the end of file names that indicate the type of file that it is. So an ampersand or an @ symbol indicates it's a linked file. The asterisk indicates it's an executable, like a program, and the / means that it is a subdirectory inside of that. So that might be another common thing that you use with the ls command. Equal signs means it's a socket, which we won't have much of those until we start creating them. And the pipe means that it's a named pipe file. Again, we won't use those till later on. But -F is common, and then another one is -L. This is for our long listing. Now, we're in our home directory now, so let's, I'm going to clear the screen so it'll come up at the top. And then one of the common options I use is ls-L. This, or you could always do ls-LA to include the invisible files. So ls-L is the long listing, that's the L, and then A, which is the invisible files. So when I do ls-LA, it shows me the long listing of the all of the files that are in the current working directory that I'm in, including the invisible files. So this unit, or this section of the chapter, it explains what each of these columns means. So that's where these 1 through 8 come in. And we have, we will work with these later on. But what you'll see here is these are permissions. This first set, there's 10 things here. This tells us if it's or what permissions we have on the file. So for example, if I look at the music directory, I can tell it's a directory because the first one is a D. If it's a dash, that means it's a file. So I have a dash or a D, so I can see that music is a directory, but this thing called ICE authority is a file because it has a dash as the first character. And then we have set of permissions: read, write, execute, read, write, execute, read, write, execute. And if there are no permissions, then you'll see a dash. But we have a whole unit where we explain permissions. The second is how many linked files. These are the owner of the directory and also the group that the owner belongs to. This is the directory or file size, and then this is when it was last accessed or created. So on my music directory was last accessed or created on May 15th, which is when I happened to build this operating system. So that is explained back here on page 91 if you want to read a little bit more about that. Link counters, it's where that listed the 2 usually was a common one. We talk more about that in chapter 5 as well as the permissions in chapter 4. So ls-F, ls-FA, those are common commands. And then also one really common shortcut is LL. LL is a shortcut for ls-l. So you can type that and it'll come up as well. There is a file command. To display the file types of any file, you can use the file command. Simply give the file command an argument specifying what type of file to analyze. So if I want to analyze the desktop thing, and I don't know if it's a directory, I could do file desktop, and it'll tell me, hey, that's a directory. Or I could do file project desktop, because project is one file, desktop is another file, and it'll say project is a text file, and then desktop is a directory file. Or file asterisk, and it will list all of the things that are currently in there. So again, when we look at files like this, you don't get a lot of information. So you could do file asterisk, bam, and it'll say, oh, that's a directory, that's a directory, that's a directory. You know, here they're all directories. Normally you don't, the blue just, it indicates that it's a directory, but you might not always see the blue. If you're on the black screen terminal, it might not be colored. And when we look at that file, we can't just tell what it is, if it's a file or directory. But this is really helpful when we start creating files and directories and you start navigating. You need to know if what you're working with is a file or a directory. So that's kind of a helpful little command in this section. ls-a is explained, and then also here's the combination of commands that you can do as well. Here's a common list of the options that you will see with ls. You don't have to memorize them all. You'll get to a point where you'll use the ones that you use more often and you'll memorize them, but you won't have to memorize that whole list for anything. Always remember you can use man pages, and I got one extra M in there, but you can use man pages to run on any command and it will list all of the options. So when I do man space ls and hit enter, it's going to pull up the ls manual, and then I'm going to navigate through it using my enter or my space bar and look at the options that are there. So enter does one page at a time. I'm sorry, space bar does one page at a time. Enter does one line at a time. As I navigate through here, and I can see what these different options do. I can go, oh, if I do -D on ls, it will list the directory entries instead of the contents. What does that mean? You can go test it out. And remember, to get out of man pages, you can just hit the Q and it will exit out of there. Wildcard meta characters. These are asterisks that you've seen in previous sections, but you can use this for looking for different things. So if you want to do ls project asterisk, you want to list, what this says is list everything that has the word project and then something after it. So if it's just project 1 or 12 or 13, this asterisk is the wildcard. So only those files or directories that are in where I currently am located, if they have that word in there, it will be returned to the screen. The question mark it indicates one digit after that word you're searching for, and then 2 question marks would be 2 digits. So projects that have a single digit like 1 or 2, 3, 4, 5 would be returned. But here, when you use 2 question marks, it would have to be 2 digits after that, or 2 spaces after project. You can also use brackets and say bracket 1, 3, and 5, and that says anything that has a 1, a 3, or a 5 at the end of project, return. Or not is the exclamation point for not 1, 2, 3, or 1, 3, or 5. That would be anything like 2 or 4 returned, but not 1, 3, or 5. So that's just some different ways that you can look through files using the ls command and the file command, and also using wildcards. It really helps searching for things and looking at files a lot easier. Thanks.